I'm a bit of a wimp when it comes to horror, but I love Halloween. I love spooky season. For me, October reading is very much a game of two halves, especially this year with the trends in publishing. I personally have seen so many horror books that I have been excited by this year, more so than any other year. I think horror is having a real moment, and I am really intrigued by so many of the concepts. I'm also making it a point to try and read more horror this year because I feel like I'm missing out. So I've been trying to actively read more horror this year, and luckily there's lots and lots of options. On the other hand, I really personally enjoy that kind of pumpkin spice level of Halloween. I love what I think is being kind of marketed now more as cozy horror. I love that kind of paranormal, spooky, small town monsters, classic monsters vibe. What am I reading this week? I have decided to play a bit of a game with this idea. And the game is very much inspired by Play Your Cards Right, which TV show. Then obviously Gavin Reads It All has a TBR game that works a little bit like this, and so does Leandra at the TBR Zero. Basically, I'm going to have two options for each read. One will be scary and one will be spooky. And then I'm going to draw cards. The highest card will be the book that I read. So hopefully that is zoomed in enough that you can see the cards when I draw them. We are going to start with our first matchup. Scary, we are going to go with You Weren't Meant to Be Human by Andrew Joseph White. This is the author's first adult horror. I've really enjoyed his YA horror in the past, and I'm a little apprehensive about trying adult because I think it's going to be genuinely frightening. This is a dystopian alien invasion body horror with a trans protagonist. Then for spooky, we are going to go with Crafting for Sinners by Jenny Keifer. This is about a queer woman who has to fight her way out of a craft store that has been taken over by a religious cult. So for scary, we have a 2. So I took out all the aces in this deck, so I genuinely don't think it's possible for that one to win. Unless we get another 2, in which case we need to figure out what we do when there's a tie. But for the spooky one, which would be Crafting for Sinners, we have a 3. So Crafting by Sinners wins, but by the smallest margin. For our next matchup, we are going to do, for scary, I have Lucky Day by Chuck Tingle. It's a global catastrophe known as the low probability event, and it seems like it's just weird and strange things happen, becoming more and more absurd and more dangerous. Then I put this one up against a spooky one that I also don't know a lot about because that seemed fair. So for spooky, I've picked How to Survive This Fairy Tale by S.M. Hollow. The blurb just says, after losing everything in service to the evil queen and driven to the edge of sanity by a cruel narrator who won't let him die, Hansel must bring himself to do the impossible, forge his own destiny, or give up on his happily ever after. This is quite a hard mashup because I have enjoyed Chuck Tingle in the past, but I also am really intrigued by this How to Survive a Fairy Tale. So for scary and lucky day, we are going with a 9. So a 9 is going to be, without the face cards, a 9 is going to be fairly hard to beat, I think. But we could be spread, we could get a 10, we could get another 9. And we have a 6. So that means that I will be reading the scary book for this one, which is Lucky Day by Chuck Tingle. And for the last pairing choice that I'm going to do, my scary choice is going to be The Lamb by Lucy Rose. This, I think, is more literary horror and possibly something to do with cannibals and a sapphic relationship. And then for spooky horror, I'm going to go with Colin Gets a Promotion and Dooms the World, I think it's called, by Mark Waddell. This, I think, is a bit more lighthearted. It's one of those books where you have satanic rituals, but through a kind of very corporate structure and that kind of mundane type of living. So for Scary and the Lamb, we have king. It's probably going to be the lamb. And for Colin gets promoted, have another king. Since it's a tie, I think we'll just draw again. So again, we're back for the scary one, and that is a 6. And for spooky, it is a 10. So I'm going to be reading the Colin Gets Promoted and Dooms the World. So with all 3 draws done, that means that for this vlog, my plan is to read Crafting for Sinners, Lucky Day, and Colin Gets Promoted and Destroys the World. I'll check in with you about that title. I've started Crafting for Sinners by Jenny Keifer. This is actually not as cozy as I thought it would be. In my head, I had made the, I guess, traditional and stereotypical mistake of assuming that something about crafting and yarn and crochet would inherently be cozy, and this one isn't. That's fine though, because I'm having a great time with it. It's just not quite what I expected. In fact, by the 50-page mark, the book has got really gory and quite violent. So that's maybe a heads up if you were tempted to make the same mistake I did. Without giving too much away about the plot at this stage, the summary is pretty much bang on. We have Ruth, who has been fired by the big box craft store she works for because they found out that she's in a lesbian relationship. As she's trying to make ends meet, she's taken craft commissions and she runs out of yarn. So she makes a trip back to the store so that she can purchase more. Since getting fired, she's been helping herself to a 5-finger discount and been stealing bits and pieces when she needs them. So far, she's never been challenged, but that's about to change. When she is caught out, she realizes how disastrous this is going to be for her life, but she decides that it's probably best to go along and hope for the best. Until the store clerk decides to attack her and she's forced to flee through the store, fighting off different employees as they come after her. As the store is run by this new creationist religious group, Ruth reflects back on her life so far, her meeting with her girlfriend Abigail, the fiance that she ended up leaving, who was a member of the new creationists, and she listens into the various conversations around the store as she's hiding. And it sounds more and more like, instead of just a religious group, the new creationists are a cult, and they're definitely up to some kind of ritual. Now, whether this ritual that they're preparing for is actually something supernatural in nature, or whether it is some group cult delusion, we've still yet to figure out. I have to say, this version of the book, which is the paperback, is absolutely stunning. The crochet hand design is actually a slightly raised effect, so it feels like a real texture in your hands. This would also be a great book if you are looking to do the 2025-2026 Halloween bingo board that's going around at the moment. It would count perfectly for that mixed media square because it has store maps, it has pamphlets, and it has radio podcast transcripts throughout the book. I also found it really interesting when I read the back of the book that Jenny Keifer actually owns and runs a horror-specific bookstore in Kentucky, and that's already definitely made my one-day travel bucket list. Well, I finished Crafting for Sinners, and I had such a good time with this book. It's just so much fun. Like, that's the main thing that I come away with from this book, is it's fun and enjoyable. A lot more violent and a lot more graphic than I was expecting, but I think it fits with what the book is trying to do. A lot more graphic and a lot more violent than I was expecting, but I think that fits with what the book is trying to do, and it's certainly not a flaw. It was never not going to be what the book was. As I said earlier, that was purely my own kind of misunderstanding and my own prejudices coming through. I will say that this is very much a character-driven book. We are spending a lot of time in Ruth's head. We're getting to know her as a character. We're getting to know her reflections on her relationship. We're getting to know more about her as a character. We're getting to know more about her relationship with Abigail, how that came about, where the relationship has evolved to. We're getting to know about her past relationships, and we're getting to see her character really under fire and see her at those weak moments where she wants to give up, see what pushes her to carry on, see what she's capable of kind of forging herself into. All of this is happening while the book is very action packed, but I don't think particularly plot heavy. There is, of course, a plot to the story. Ruth's trapped in the store, the creationists are out to get her, but it has almost, I would say, this is Die Hard if instead of Bruce Willis in the tower, we have a queer woman in a craft shop. A lot of the action is running around, it's crawling through tunnels, it's scaling structures, it's creating makeshift weaponry and taking out the various goons that come after her. It's got more depth than Die Hard because as she's doing these things, she is having those reflections on herself, her relationship, on the queerness and prejudice in this town, in who would miss her if she was gone. That's in her description at the back. It mentions she's an avid crafter, and that absolutely comes through. I could so clearly imagine the really big type of craft shop this is describing, but we also see her using the different crafting tools to her advantage. We get little references to things that crafters will understand, and I just thought it gave the character so much nuance and so much relatability. The only nitpick I would have if I had to pick something is that on occasion this does feel a little bit like a newer writer in terms of writing. There are moments where the description is just a tiny bit overblown or the metaphor sort of runs away with her a little. And while that works fine in some genres, especially horror, especially if you're doing gothic horror, I just thought that it didn't really fit with the shorter, sharper, punchier action book that this is. It could purely be taste, but I just think if some of those metaphors, some of those descriptions had been pulled back a little, it would have felt more natural, more readable. Overall, it was probably somewhere around a 4 or a 4.5, maybe closer to the 4.5 for pure enjoyment. Lucky Day by Chuck Tingle. This one is a little harder to describe than Bury Your Gaze. It's quite a high concept, and at the moment where I am, which is about the 25% mark, there is still a lot of unknowns. We have been following Vera, who is a statistics and probability professor. We meet her when everything is going her way. She has a brand new fiance, her book deal is getting published, she's out for a big dinner with all of her friends, and then the low probability event occurs. This is really the explosive event of the first couple of chapters. In Bury Your Gaze, Tingle does something similar where the first chapter starts out very slow, very everyday, a little mundane, and then ends with a massive kind of bang. This does that, but to extreme. We do start off again very casually with the getting ready, preparing for the dinner. We see the kind of mundaneness of life, and then this event kicks off. All the laws of chance, of probability, just go flying out the window, and we see absolutely ridiculous events occurring, and to a really violent degree. I don't want to give anything away that isn't mentioned in the summary itself, so I'll just read you the little description that comes on the back of the book. 8 million killed in a single day, each of them in improbable, bizarre ways. Strangled by parade balloon ropes, torn apart by exploding manhole covers, attacked by a chimpanzee wielding a typewriter. So after that, we jump forward 8 years. This is now the kind of main body of the story, and we see Vera dealing with the after effects of that event. As I think I talked about, one of the reasons I wanted to get more and more into horror, because I think it's really interesting to see how certain social dynamics, mental health issues are all dealt with, and this does a great job at showing us a combination of PTSD, depression, grief, because not only has she lost people and has she seen absolutely horrific sights, she's also dealing with this kind of nihilistic outlook on the world now, where she just can't seem to convince herself that anything actually matters. And she is really struggling, and I think so far this has been such a good portrait of that. I am interested to see what other ways this low probability event is going to have ramifications through the world, whether there's going to be more unlikely events, how we're going to see Vera deal with the different traumas that she has experienced and will probably continue to experience. I've come to the end of Lucky Day by Chuck Tingle, and this one I did have a good time with it, but I don't think it was exactly what I had been picturing. Although the opening scene is really action packed, really violent, with a few gory moments, and there's a couple of similar scenes later in the novel, I would say this felt more like the kind of violence you get in the Final Destination movies. That's not quite comical, but it's so extreme and so unrealistic. It's fun, but it didn't feel as horrifying to me as some of the moments that were in Bury Your Gaze. In Bury Your Gaze, there were two particular scenes. One was violent, and one was more about the anticipation of a secret being revealed that might potentially lead to violence. In both of those moments, I was listening to the book and I very nearly took my headphones out. I just didn't want to be present in those scenes. The level of tension, both when it's just someone clicking through someone's computer history and also during the scene with the baseball bat, I thought that in those, Tingle managed to really draw out the moment into that kind of slow, chillingly realistic and brutal inevitability type of horror. This was much more light, and although there were very, very violent, horrific deaths, it just didn't have that sense of realism to it. And I know that Bury Your Gaze had a very supernatural element going on, but somehow it still felt more realistic, more grounded, whereas this felt almost more kind of fantastical violence. It's the difference between Negan in Walking Dead, Family Barbecue, and Bloodlines. They're both very violent, but they had a very different tone, and I thought that was what these books did. This one, as I said, I didn't think felt as horror specific, but it definitely had a really strong sci-fi angle to it. So it feels maybe more like a genre blend of sci-fi and horror than something that is more straight up horror with a couple of speculative elements. I did really enjoy it, but ultimately I didn't enjoy it as much as I've enjoyed that previous book. The next book that I plan to read for this vlog is Colin Gets a Promotion and Ruins the World. It has quite a long title. I think it's by Mark Waddell, and I think it's Colin Gets Promoted and Dooms the World. But I will double check that when I come back to you once I've started the book. Colin Gets Promoted and Dooms the World is actually the title of the book. And I'm sitting at somewhere around the halfway mark. I'm having a really good time with it. I am enjoying the corporate mundanity of the world, if that makes sense. I'm really liking the way that Mark Waddell has came up with ways to integrate different terminology, different kind of departments that we would know from a very corporate structure, and found a way to incorporate them into this supernaturally evil corporation. We have things like human resources, which isn't about personnel, it's actually about extracting resources from humans. So we see their tears being gathered, and we have Colin mentioning that sometimes the teeth just go everywhere. Our main character, Colin, is a data analyst for the Human Resources Department. His position is painted as being one of those sort of under the radar, interchangeable underling type of roles, except that his immediate superior doesn't like him and has started to sabotage the reports they are sending to their manager. As such, Colin looks more and more incompetent, and it's been decided that he has a week to turn things around or he's going to be terminated. And in this company, Dark Enterprises, that literally means terminated. So when a clearly demonic character turns up and offers to get him a promotion from level 6 all the way up to assistant to the CEO at level 13, all in exchange for some vague and unspecified favour in the future, Colin is desperate and leaps at the chance without really thinking or caring what this unspecified favour is going to be. The opening chapters reminded me a lot of the opening to House in the Cerulean Sea, where we see Linus watching the clock, we see him with the rows of other desks, everyone doing the exact same job at the exact same time, and then getting called to the manager's office in this vaguely ominous way. Colin is very much a cog in the machine, and we get to experience that routine and that mundanity through him. We are talking about alternate dimensions and hellspawn and people being trapped in mirrors if the haunts catch their eye. It's a really nice contrast between the supernatural, the tension, the danger, and just the everyday job of filing paperwork. That continues throughout the novel, that idea of the records office where you pull boxes out and there's a VHS from the 80s that is the training guide that's never been updated, except in this that's probably about how to summon a demon or how to banish an angel. Something I am really enjoying about Colin as the main character, as opposed to, for instance, Linus that we saw in Cerulean Sea, is that Colin is really bitchy and bitter and vindictive, but it's all hidden under this layer of self-effacingness, of people pleasing and trying not to catch anyone's attention. Colin talks at one point about how the world is still, as adults, divided into the kids that were bullied in school and the kids that did the bullying, and that the bullies just come into the world with a greater sense of confidence, a greater sense of being owed, and that the world kind of molds around them to provide that. Colin is obviously from the other camp. He has been bullied at high school and he still holds a grudge over this. He still sees the ways in which he is overlooked and which he himself defers to other people. And although he does that, he resents every minute of it. And I just found him such an interesting character because he's not particularly nice. He's incredibly self-absorbed. And as things go quite literally to hell, he's not concerned about the city as a whole. He's only marginally concerned about the thousands of people that are going missing and how that's going to affect their loved ones. If he can save the people that he cares about, the rest of them can go hang. And honestly, I can understand that in a lot of ways, especially when everything is so high stress and everything is so on the cusp of disaster. I think it made him feel really relatable. This isn't a character that is out to save the world or out to sacrifice himself nobly for the cause. If Colin is going to make any sacrifices, he's determined that they're going to be ones that will benefit him. He's only going to do these things and save other people and risk himself if ultimately it might get him another promotion or another chance at a type of power. So different from most of the protagonists we see. I genuinely at this stage don't know what type of story this is. I don't know if Colin is going to suddenly realise humanity has its worth and take on those heroic roles that he's been, rejecting so far, whether he's going to go up against these great big bads, sacrifice himself, sacrifice it all to protect humanity. I don't know if this is actually a villain story, and what we're going to see is either through luck or actual achievement, Colin ending up on top, but as the bad guy. If he does end up as the bad guy, will he end up pitted against one of the other characters that he and we have come to care about so far in the novel? It's really interesting. I'm really enjoying it. It's a lot of fun. I really like that we are playing that line between hero and villain really fast and loose. It really suits the comedy level, the tone on the novel, and I think it suits the plot that we're doing really well. I finished Colin Gets Promoted and Dooms the World, and I had such a good time with this book. It was, as I thought, a real kind of fun book. The plot is kind of comical and kind of wacky, but it's a really, really fun ride. I had said that I wasn't sure about whether we were going down a Colin will, find himself, he'll find humanity, he'll grow as a person, and he'll want to become the hero to save the world, or whether we might embrace some of those more bitter, self-centered qualities he had, and whether he might become the villain of the piece to be then either taken down or not. And it kind of fell somewhere in the middle, which I really liked. Colin does work towards saving the world, but he's not your typical fantasy protagonist who is doing it to save the world. He's doing it because it's very much in his own interest, and I really enjoyed that. I really like that he's not as squeaky clean. He doesn't come out of this having been changed as a person. He still wants to go back and work for the same company because he believes that they can give him the power he wants, even though he's seen all of this destruction they wreak. And I'm not saying that makes him a good person or whatever, but I just thought it was really interesting as a character. It's different than so many of the hero's journey or growth storylines that we get. The author done something different with it. He presented us with a character who does the right thing, maybe not for necessarily the right reasons, but has done the right thing. Does that make him a hero or not? And it was nice and it was interesting, and like I said, it was a really fun book. So for my spooky versus scary TBR, I ended up reading two of the books that I had pegged as being spooky or cozy horror: Crafting for Sinners and Colin Gets Promoted and Dooms the World. Both of them were more violent than I had imagined, especially Crafting for Sinners, but I do think they fit generally that cozy vibe. I'm not exactly sure what makes a horror a cozy horror, but there was just something in it that I did feel hit those kind of tropes. They both had that pulpy action movie type of feel. Crafting for Sinners fulfilled the Supreme Witch prompt for This Witch Reads, and it fulfilled the Night Shift prompt for Halloween-a-Thon. Colin Gets Promoted fulfilled the Witch Hunt prompt for This Witch Reads. In terms of the Watch-a-thon aspect of Halloween-a-Thon, I wasn't really pushing myself this week. I didn't actually watch that much. What I did watch were rewatches. I've been watching some episodes of the X-Files. I'm somewhere in season 2, but that's, I'm picking them up here and there. There's no I'm not trying to get through them. And I did rewatch, though, the full miniseries of Shard Lake. I know that's not horror-y, but that kind of murder mystery at the monastery, it felt fitting, and I really wanted something that had those kind of dark, wintry night vibes. It was what I was looking for. I spent an evening with hot chocolate on my sofa. So that was my reading watching experience for this week. Let me know if any of these books or movies have particularly interested you. Let me know if you've read or are going to read any of them. Let me know if you've read or are going to read any of them and what your plans are for the upcoming week. I know we're getting closer and closer to Halloween, so a lot of us have some really exciting activities planned out. I'd love to know what yours are. As always, would really appreciate if you could like the video, and if you want, subscribe to the channel to see more updates from me. I really hope that I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.